right, there have been a few buzzwords that we've heard all day. Here's three of them. We just heard one: trust, engagement, and data is certainly important to our business. And here to discuss all three on this panel, moderated by Scott Davis, Senior Vice President of NPR Corporate Sponsorship. And I'll let you take it away, Scott.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us here at Podcast Movement at South by Southwest. As was mentioned, I'm Scott Davis. I'm the Senior Vice President of Corporate Sponsorship at NPR, and I am very thrilled to be joined here today by three terrific panelists. I'll start with you, Rich Tunkel from Nielsen. Also next to Rich is Tara Gieslin. Did I get your name right?
Yes.
Fantastic. That's a great start. And Tara is the Senior Account Director at Mynt Agency, and Tara will provide the agency's perspective on media mix and effective creative and measurement, and also joined by Gladwell Mwangi from Whole Foods, who offers the brand perspective. And did I get your name right?
You did.
Dang, 2 for 2. I'm amazed.
Fantastic.
Gladwell will provide the brand perspective on why podcasting has become a key part of the Whole Foods strategy. So a little bit about why we're here. The landscape of audio advertising is obviously evolving rapidly. We're quickly moving past simple downloads and basic metrics and diving deep into the critical role of advanced measurement, true attribution, and continuous optimization. When paired with the right data and tools, podcast advertising is proven to drive effective reach for brands, and research from Sounds Profitable shows that podcasting's effective reach, and that is reach multiplied by recall, is 27% higher than paid streaming music, X/Twitter, Snap, Reddit, and Threads. This is an extremely powerful stat for brands. So our goal today is to unlock the full potential of this medium, and we'll talk about how new capabilities like Nielsen's NMI Podcast Fusion are driving more effective, measurable, incremental reach. We'll also talk about how to execute successful campaigns and leverage strong creative to truly maximize outcomes. And of course, because I work there, we'll also explore the unique value that public media brings to the table. We'll talk about how that brand trust and proven reliable reach that NPR delivers often outperforms many of our commercial counterparts. So let's dive in. Tara, I'll start with you, and let's talk big picture. When you're thinking about the total media mix for clients, where does podcasting fit, and what originally led Mynt to begin incorporating it into your media plans?
So podcasting fills a unique role in the media mix. It combines audience engagement with trusted environments. I got to take these off. Many of the brands explore podcasts because of audience alignment. But really what makes the channel powerful is the connection that we have with the content, and just really being able to make sure that the podcast audiences are intentionally choosing what they're listening to. They're engaged in what they're listening to. They want to be there, and spending time with meaningful brands allows brands to communicate in a more authentic way. So podcasting is one of those few environments where attention, trust, and measurability all comes together and can coexist.
So that opt-in aspect, that lean-in part of it is a big dynamic within
Absolutely.
podcasting.
When it comes to podcast endorsers or hosts, and also just being able to choose that content, that one-on-one content that you're listening to, and you're fully engaged in that, really helps brands like draw in the listener, and they pay attention to what's being said in its show.
Yeah, I've always thought of podcasting as like me time,
Yes,
where you
absolutely.
selected your titles and you curated them. It means something personally important. That's great. Gladwell, what about for Whole Foods? Why podcasting? How does that fit into an overall media mix for such a well-known brand and well-respected brand?
First of all, thank you for having me here today. It's an honor to be here with you, Tara, and our rich friend. For Whole Foods, I believe it's all three. It's the success we see, it's the trust that's being called out here on stage by other presenters. But like most of the brands represented here today, we've been able to scale podcasts through proving its incrementality. And that success is true for brands, whether they are playing with podcasts as a demand gen or demand driving tool, or whether it's a brand reach play, you'll still be able to see success if it's done right. And I think it's primarily easier to see success with podcasts because of what you called out initially, the ability for a podcast to earn trust and build trust. That is key. And it's different from other digital channels. It's different from social media, which is considered more efficient. Yes, podcast does come at a premium CPM, but your 2 seconds of scrolling on social media doesn't compare to the level of trust you're building with an engaged host. Like you've just said, my podcast behaviors are a ritual. And so with that comes trust that you've built with the host, and a brand is able to tap into that trust, borrow that trust, to actually build credibility, to build perception that will eventually, hopefully, lead to an action, a conversion, a store drive. That is true, again, whether it's upper or lower funnel, and we've seen it happen through incremental testing.
And we'll get into measurement as we continue this conversation. But Rich, the incrementality, that is the magic word for Nielsen. And it's been a huge topic of conversation for you all in podcasting and other media. Can you talk a little bit about how Nielsen's NMI tool quantifies that incremental reach and creates more effective reach?
Sure, I'd be happy to get into that. Taking this off because I don't want to hear myself in my ears. So I don't know if folks in this room are satisfied with the amount of dollars that are going to podcasting at this point. $2.5 billion industry. The rate of growth has slowed in podcasting in terms of dollars in the industry. Does anyone think that that's okay? Does anyone think that there's lots of headroom to grow, but for some reason, despite the increased audiences, ad revenue has not kept pace? Is that a problem for anybody? So let me tell you what is one of the major governors right now that's holding back podcasting. Despite the compelling pitch that you might be taking out to advertisers, despite the fact that they want to spend more in podcasting, they're not able to. Why is that? Because they can't show the incrementality. They can't show what podcasting adds on top of their full media plan. It has been the governor. What if there was a place podcasting could show up where it could be evaluated in the same way that other media are? Television, CTV, digital, social. Well, there is a place where planning takes place. Every year, there's over 3.5 million campaigns that are planned on Nielsen tools. It's legacy media. This is reach and frequency. It's not sexy. It's not glamorous, but it's really, really important. And the tool is called Nielsen Media Impact. So it's used by every major holding company. And as I said, about 3.5 million plans go through that tool every single year. We happen to be about 2 weeks out from the time of year when the most amount of planning is done on that tool, in April. And the reason that happens is because they're planning for their upfront spend. And I'm happy to tell you that for the first time ever, podcasting is on that tool. Yeah, go ahead. You can slap. It's fine. Yeah. So we're going to see the ability for planners to shift budgets around, see what difference it makes in their media campaign. And I prepared a couple slides to show you what this is going to look like. Go back one slide. Okay. So if we just take television, $66 billion is spent in linear television every single year. If podcasting could steal just 2% of those dollars, there's your next billion in growth for the industry. How do we do that? How do we show that this is a good investment? Nielsen has partnered with Edison Research. They're really gold standard in podcast measurement, Edison Podcast Metrics. And that is the tool that we're using to run into our planning tools. It is fused to our television data, and then you can cross-channel against every other media that's in there, including legacy media like broadcast TV, broadcast radio, even newspapers in there, CTV, digital, social, and see what the incrementality looks like. We looked at one television campaign and what the impact was of just shifting dollars to NPR. Just one network showed a 29% increase in effective reach on the campaign. Without increasing budget, this is shifting existing dollars from other media. So the overall campaign for Mynt or for Whole Foods is no more, but yet you're getting a lot more for your media spend. And that's a 20% allocation to NPR podcasts. That would be very meaningful additional revenue to NPR. Why does that happen? Why do you get incremental reach? Well, it's because the difference is the audiences in podcasting. The qualitative, these are different advanced audience targets that you're seeing on the screen here, like those that have accumulated wealth, that are in the midlife stage of their careers, and even young achievers. And you can see NPR and other podcast networks performing very well against these particular demographics. A legacy television does not perform well against these demographics. And so you're getting incremental reach. Actually, we could show the only both and the unique audience that's on NPR or any of these other podcast networks. All the podcast networks are available in the tool. Anything that's in Edison's measurement tool, it's available to show up there. NPR was our premier subscriber to the service. Their network is now surfaced on the agencies. You have the opportunity, if you're associated with the other networks, to also show up on that tool. Right now, we're surfacing podcasting as an industry, genre, NPR, and some select top podcast shows. But to get the long tail and the programmatic benefit, that requires a subscription. Who's using this? As I said, it's used by all the major holding companies, 85% of all U.S. agencies, 23 of the top 25 advertising agencies. Publishers are using this. So iHeart, Odyssey, Fox, NBC, and others are using this to make the case for their platform. And they'll take budgets and shift them all day long, share it with the agency so that they're going out there and talking the planner's language. And finally, I guess that was it. So just that's what we're doing. And all this matters because, again, as good as your pitch is, unless you're able to show the planner the difference in what this means to them, they're not going to be able to unlock those dollars more so than what's going into podcasting now, which is frankly largely experimental dollars. And you want to get into the real budgets, it requires the data to show that it's worth it. So that's what we're doing.
That's terrific, Rich. And I think for everybody in this room, whether it's creator, or agency, or a producer, this is all compelling information that all of us can use, and it tells a really, really fantastic story. And you're talking about qualitative plus scale, and we're not even getting into the benefits of the halo effect, which we will get into that. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But Tara, directly to you, where does Nielsen's NMI tool fit into your planning process? How do you deploy this data?
So what's really great about tools like this NMI is that you can look at the brand, the media mix as a whole. And instead of podcasts being isolated like it's always been, we can look at it and compare it against all the different forms of audio, streaming, radio, TV. And so we're able to compare podcasts and see that data up against each other, and then be able to make an actual plan and share that with the brand that is then going to not have to be hope that it hits. We are proving that it hits, and therefore we can move forward with a campaign. So it's super, super exciting that we're going to be able to see podcasts included in that tool going forward.
That's awesome. And it just, the thing I love about it most too is we're not talking about trying to invent new budgets, although we're always working on that. We're talking about taking an existing budget and maximizing it for clients. And that's the true power in it for me. And Rich, one of the things I wanted to touch on with you, you all have done some work specifically for us, as you've mentioned. Are there white labeled specific examples of brands that you've worked on for us that you could share?
So without disclosing who the advertisers are, we
Right.
did look at specific categories, and we looked at a lot of financial categories. For instance, those that were spending on television and shifting 10% of the budget over to NPR podcasts. What we saw was anywhere between 10 and 29% increases in effective reach for those campaigns. And for those campaigns that were more digital and using, there was one campaign that we looked at was 70% social and 30% video, digital video. When there was a shift of budget to NPR podcasts, we saw a 13% increase in effective reach. But in every case, there's opportunity to see that increase because you're getting a new audience at not only a new time and a new way. It doesn't matter, what the category is and what the specific audience is. We were also seeing that there was no reduction in key demographic reach. So that's really important. Am I trading good reach for bad reach? Am I losing 18 to 34 just to gain 35 plus? No. Every demographic that we saw in those share shifts was positive. So without any reduction on the young end, for instance, now NPR has a more mature audience, but 35 to 54 saw huge gains. 18 to 34 also saw gains. So the great news is the advertiser's not giving up anything to make that shift. And we saw that time and again across those different campaigns that we measured.
Yeah, I'm thinking about one in particular where you showed no reduction even in social budget, because clearly that's important and delivers a different component, but taking away directly from OTT or CTV that showed a true incremental reach without sacrificing anything else. So that's one of the things that's compelling. But while you've got the floor, Rich, are there other tools that Nielsen is deploying that you'd like to talk about?
The other tool, it's not a new deployment, but it's a new way of using the tool. We've been doing brand lift studies at Nielsen, outcomes measurement, for almost a decade in terms of podcasts. We've thousands of studies and campaigns that we specifically measured. So we're measuring things like purchase intent, brand affinity, likelihood to visit a site or to shop. And what we've done from that is we've looked at the norms, looked at the different elements of those campaigns, and we're now able to say what works in terms of creative execution on the podcast, regardless of how you're going to run it. So for instance, of the different creative executions, I'm looking at my phone because I wrote my notes in here. I want to make sure I get this right. So strategies such as humor, using humor in your copy, storytelling, if you have an expert, strong call to action, personal anecdote in the story. So that's probably most associated with host read. High frequency of the campaign, immersive audio, and early mentions of the brand. Among those, you know what the most powerful creative execution is? It's with storytelling specifically. Yeah, no, absolutely. There's someone who knows their advertising and knows podcast, what works. So storytelling showed the most significant increase in purchase intent. And if you can include a personal anecdote in that story, So there you go. There's the second most. Then you combine, get purchase intent increases that are 30% higher than the norm. And those two elements together will give you as powerful of a lift as a host read ad. So that's using a pre-produced spot. That's got storytelling in it, and it's got an anecdote in it. That's as powerful as a host read ad. So that's a huge boom for programmatic in the space, right? You can do programmatic that's as effective as a host read ad if you're using the right creative elements. And there's other elements as well. Now, if you take those two components, storytelling and a personal anecdote, and you tell it from a host, now you're seeing even larger gains, of course. We saw gains that are 3 times as high as the typical ad when you combine them. So we're taking our data, the thousands of studies that are in that normative data set, and we're making it actionable so that you can upfront understand how these different creative elements are going to set the bar for the campaign. What's the KPI you're looking for? And we've got it broken down by category, whether it's CPG or automotive, and have a really productive conversation with the advertiser around why you're going to execute the campaign a certain way. Then you can measure it and see how it delivers. So that's another really powerful way that we've been helping the industry, that we've been working with publishers and continue to.
That's super cool. All right. So Rich, for folks who are just learning about Podcast Fusion, how do they gain access to it?
So Podcast Fusion, like I said, right now it's on the agency's desks at the planning level. So nothing to do for you there in terms of the industry showing up. If you want your network to show up, then you can talk to Nielsen and we can make sure that we get you surfaced in there, like NPR's surfaced in there right now. So that's how you would do that. But the industry is going to show up in a meaningful way from the get-go. This round of budgeting, and we expect it to make a difference in 2026.
That's great. All right. Thanks, Rich. So back to the group. We've been talking about measurement. We've been talking about the tools that folks can deploy for measurement, but we have not talked about halo effect. I mentioned that we'd get into that a little bit. It's clearly important to us. Listeners to NPR trust NPR. They transfer that trust over to sponsors, that trust and affinity and consideration and purchase intent, all those things, they're in a straight line. But we're not the only ones, and we recognize that. So when you all are planning, where does halo effect factor in? Gladwell, I'll start with you. And how do you measure it?
It's a great topic because specifically for podcasts, like I said earlier, it's able to make a brand a part of a conversation in a way that other digital channels are not able to do. And while measurement, I think, and performance is something that we dangle as a carrot to make things look very polished, it's easier said than done, especially for podcasting. The ability to work with your partners, collaborate with your media agencies, your partners who are your platform partners to get that upstream data and connect that to your downstream data, your attribution, your conversion is a really important link to have. And whether that's measured through a very linear model, an MMM or an MTA that recognizes, to your point, those multiple touch points, which one is creating a halo and how that is measured is easier said than done. So it's important, yes. It's measurable, yes. It's something that many brands have succeeded to do. But if you're walking into an organization without these infrastructures, the MMM or the MTA or whatever other, you know how hard it is to pull those impression upstream to that downstream conversion. So it's working very closely with our partners and trying to make sure that we're in lockstep with that mechanism, making sure that that mechanism is applied to how we're talking to our leadership about how we're moving the needle with the goals that are in front of us. That all comes together. Again, it's very much in lockstep with our partners, but my bigger point here is that it's easier said than done.
Yeah, it's a series of connecting the dots, right? Like
Exactly.
the impression, what it means to somebody, how it sticks in their minds, how it carries
Exactly.
through to a purchase intent. What about for you, Tara? How do you start connecting those dots?
So with the halo effect, it's very much a thing, definitely something we always want to look at. Whenever it comes to podcasts, your audience is trusting you. And so it's really going to build on your relationship, your trust. And when all of those elements are aligning, the advertising resonates strongly with your listeners. And so with that, we are able to measure or quantify the halo effect with brand lift studies and search lift and just overall visits. And so with the halo effect and the trust that we have, the audience has in us, you see those measurements lift in all of the different other aspects.
Yeah, and so it's telling a little bit more of a story of a
Yes.
campaign rather than just focusing on a singular data point.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
then pulling all the data points and looking at it as a whole, so we're able to see that halo effect.
So attribution's one of the data points, not
Yes.
the only data point. And Rich touched on creative, so I'd like to ask you about creative too, Tara. What do you think are the most important things that go into a creative, whether produced or host read, either one? What do you think are the critical elements?
Both of them very similar, whether it be host read or produced. You definitely want to have a message that is going to resonate with your listeners. You want it to be clear, concise, with a strong call to action. So with those three things, your hosts are able to expand on your message, but you want to keep it clear. You want to keep it clean. You don't want to go too far in depth into the messaging. You want to make sure that you're speaking to the audience in the same tone that your podcast is done in or your show is done in. Just because if you change it up and it's more, something completely different from what the listeners are used to hearing, they lose some of that trust. So we want to make sure that we keep the voice the same, the flow the same, clear, concise, strong call to action.
Yeah, and those are the ones that you see perform the best.
That's what we see perform the best, whether that be on host reads or on produced. So long as we're aligning the same content with our ads, they do very well.
Yeah, so context matters.
Yes, content
Yep.
definitely matters.
Understood. And the point is to continue to draw the listeners into something that they already appreciate and take advantage of that and leverage that, and the messaging
Absolutely.
matters. Gladwell, what about for you? I have confessed what a huge Whole Foods fan I am. I've
Amazing.
been shopping at Whole Foods for many, many years. It's such a well-regarded brand. How do you take that favorability that already exists and make sure you're conveying things like that in your creative?
I think it's interesting from someone who engages with brand from a consumer's perspective and how they're able to appreciate that message that is really well crafted to speak to all the values that will resonate with whoever is coming into a Whole Foods store, whether it's the quality, whether it's your ability to not worry about what's not in your product, those ingredients that we don't want in your product. All of that is really important to keep as part of how we're communicating our message, not just on podcasts, on any other channel. But it's interesting because the format of creative on a podcast on brand side is not as appreciated. It's typically you're playing with the same 10, 15, 30-second scripts. How you engage your audiences through storytelling is important for sure. And that is, I think, what we've leaned a lot more into, which is something that Rich called out, the ability to tell a story, even though you're conveying a message of value or convenience, that really does resonate with someone. And someone would want to connect more with that message in terms of how they deliver a conversion or a site lift, et cetera, et cetera. We've seen that have a measurable impact. The other truth is, and it's true for most brands, host reads, of course, are performing a lot better. So having a closer relationship with your host as you're briefing them, as you're walking and talking to them about what your brand priorities are is equally important. They know what works and resonates best for their audiences. So they're able to take your script and interpret it rather in the best way that they know how to, something that a brand cannot do, something that we have no lever to. So it's working really closely with the experts, the showrunners who are able to turn an ordinary 10-second, 15-second, 30-second script into a story, into magic. That I think is a huge difference in how we look at our creative.
Well, when you say brand experience, that just makes so much sense to me that because the store itself is an experience that I don't want to get too carried away, but shopping there people appreciate that. And when they appreciate that and you're drawing them in with your communications as well, your advertising, then that has to stay consistent, I imagine. And what is consistent amongst the three of you as well, it strikes me, whether it's storytelling or concise messaging or brand experience, is no ambiguity. Like there is clarity in the messaging that has to be there no matter what. If you're telling the story of a brand, then that has to be a clear story, concisely delivered, that draws people into an experience. So the consistency to me certainly stands out. So Tara Gladwell, with the evolution of podcasting, with the evolution of measurement and attribution and planning, where do you deploy attribution? What is the element that is the point in the media planning, media buying process where attribution becomes most important, Tara?
I think when attribution is brought into the plan is once you have solid KPIs, once you know what you're tracking, and make sure that you have your goals planned for that campaign, that's when attribution can come in and you can build a solid measurement, solid campaign, and be able to have clear, concise goals from the beginning as opposed to later on. You want to make sure that you're prepped and ready to go for that campaign before you start bringing in measurement.
Gladwell for Whole Foods?
I am in a very performance-led organization. And I've had the honor of working in performance-led marketing. So attribution is top of mind. It's how you're justifying your annual budgets, for example, because they have a specific return on investment that they're entitled to. So with every activation, it has to have a specific return on investment, and being able to, again, deploy media, connect that top impression that it delivers with how it can come back as a conversion or a site lift. That mechanism is very important, is how our marketing lives and breathes and is operated on a weekly and is optimized with that cadence as well. So it's how we operate, how we talk to leadership, our external stakeholders. Those are our benchmarks. And it definitely speaks to a performance-led organization. It's not so much what you'd see with perhaps brand geared advertising or brand geared podcasts, where again, maybe attribution might not be that high of a priority because those budgets are not driving that end goal, that demand goal. It's mostly for brand play. So I think it does depend on the organization, but from where I'm sitting, it's top of mind. It's where we start all the discussions, is this going to have a return on our ad spend, and is that going to be effective or efficient?
Yeah. Is it going to work?
Exactly.
Yeah. Bottom line. All right. So my esteemed panel knows this, but for the rest of the room, I'm going to ask you to hear me out. I know we're at a podcast session, but audio is a medium. Podcasting is a platform. Audio also includes near and dear to my heart and part of our name, radio. So this is where I'm going to ask you to hear me out, because radio is not the traditional antenna in the ground broadcast radio signal anymore. It's changed. Things have evolved with radio. So for each one of you, and Rich, I'll start with you. Nielsen has a deep history with radio and measurement. So I will ask you, how does radio interplay with the continued growth of podcasting?
Yeah, happy to take that one. But before I do, before I go on, I don't know if you guys are hot in here. It's a little warm. I happen to enjoy endurance sports. I like to run a lot. I do triathlon, and nothing is more important in the middle of a 13-mile run or 24-mile, 26.5 run than hydration. And I just want to say, liquid death. When you're in the middle of a run, there's nothing more refreshing than liquid death. Storytelling. I established my credibility, made it a little humorous. There you go. And you can stop by the Mynt booth for more liquid death throughout the conference. It happened to be located next to the Nielsen booth, the table a couple over, and we're happy to show you those NMI runs or any of the other stuff that we talked about earlier.
Well played, Rich.
Yeah. You can pay me later.
What's your talent fee?
Very reasonable. Very reasonable. We'll talk about that after off stage. So the question was, what are we seeing about the full use of audio? And if someone's in podcasting, are they really doing audio to its fullest? And the answer is no. Spoiler alert. But how do we know this? We actually publish for free. You can go to Nielsen.com and search for something called The Record, where we will show you the percentage of time spent across different ad-supported audio channels. For 18 to 34-year-olds, podcasting accounts for 37% of their ad time. It's significant. Radio is 45%. The two together can get you over 80% of someone's time spent with ad-supported audio. So the point is, if you're not doing both radio and podcasting, then you're not really doing an audio campaign. I know Greg was up here before saying, they got to be, from Acast was saying they have to be executed separately. Maybe yes, maybe no. But the point is, it's very easy to take a podcast campaign and make it suitable on the radio, certainly, and vice versa. So you should consider, if doing audio, using both and using them well.
Here's to that. And I will put in a plug for us as well. I mentioned this is where I work, so I'm going to talk about NPR a little bit. With us, the interesting part of it is the brand love, the halo effect is the same regardless of platform. But you're talking about a cumulative audience that practically doubles because there's very little crossover between our podcasts and our radio audience. Tara, how's that resonate with you?
Very much agree with what Rich said. We want to look at audio holistically, not as competing channels. With traditional radio, you're reaching a wide scale, and with podcast, it's deeper audience engagement. So you really want to look at both together, and utilize everything you can across all audio, as opposed to siloing yourself to one or the other.
Absolutely. And again, to be clear, we're talking about streaming audio, radio, the whole thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
All.
Yeah. And Gladwell, thoughts from Whole Foods perspective?
It's exactly what the panelists have described. They, as an audio unit, operate better together when you combine radio, podcast, and even streaming audio if you have the budgets to include it. And the impact is much greater than if you have one alone as part of your audio. It's something that is better thought about together. And we've seen performance from all three combined, which is much stronger than if you have it on podcast alone. Of course, radio is still a reach tactic. It's very great for that reach. It's still the most effective and efficient play. We've leveraged it a lot from a demand gen perspective, and still continue to see some of our strongest campaigns perform on radio, same as they are performing on podcasts. But again, that combination is something that we tackle together, and something that I think they're cousins. The Acast guy was saying that these are cousins, the radios and the podcast of the day. So that's how planners, if anything, and brand planners should continue thinking about them.
Excellent. Well, I think for us, NPR is one of those things that if folks have found their way to NPR, they just listen to NPR, whether it's a podcast or the morning news show or whatever the case. That's what we found over the years. But enough about us. I will open up the floor if there are any questions. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Paul Friedman with American Public Media. Question for Rich. In terms of crossing over between podcast and broadcast, what are the new innovations in measurement on the broadcast side now that we're talking about using both effectively?
Yeah, so the new innovations on the broadcast side are that we are bringing attribution and outcomes to full campaigns, radio as well as digital, because you can tag a digital campaign, can't always do it on the broadcast side. So we found ways to measure outcomes on the both, the totality of the campaign. If I'm recommending someone to use both radio and podcasting, got to have a solution to actually measure it on that side.